talking. This thing is so different. Sorry, guys. But anyway, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for showing up. This is the AV Tech Talks, officially what they're calling the podcast edition. So as you can see, Omar is not the hostess with the mostest tonight. It's myself. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for hanging out. We got a decent talk coming tonight, and I think you guys will enjoy it. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in the co-host of the night, and you know him already, the legend himself, the inspirational man that gets us all going when the days are long, Austin.
Well, what's going on? How are you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, man?
I can't complain, but first and foremost, I'm going to stop calling you Chris because I know you as Bodie, so the crowd got to know Bodie.
Absolutely. It's Bodie, the IT guy.
Yes, sir. We lost Omar tonight, apparently.
Yeah, he's doing what everybody wishes they could be doing, working.
Absolute truth, and that's what we all here for, right? That's all we're sharpening our skills and all trying to get better for at the end of the day to get right back on show site.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to waste any more time because Omar is not here, but we do have a very, very, very special guest tonight. And you call me the myth. I say this guy is more of the man, the myth, and the legend. This guy is a complete package when it comes to AV technicians. He's a specialist, and he's coming straight out of the New York metro area. He's well-versed. He's an A1, a V1 LED specialist, a projectionist. He does graphics, playback, bro. I mean, he does it all, the full package. So without further ado, I want to welcome our guest tonight, Ed Willock.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
What's going on, Ed?
How you guys doing?
Oh, great, man. Happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us tonight.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I know Omar couldn't be here, so thanks, Chris, for stepping up and manning the controls over here and steering the ship. You know.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, of course. It's been
You're a little low in my ears, just so you know.
What's that?
You're a little low to me.
Oh, sure. I can do something about that. That should be improving, hopefully.
Perfect.
Yes,
there we go.
You're perfect.
Much better.
Excellent.
You're loud and clear.
Good.
So, Ed, you're coming all the way from New York and joining us on this podcast tonight. Why don't you just start off by telling us, I already gave him all the credentials, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, grew up, I've lived in New York my whole life. Started doing AV the same way I think a lot of people got into AV by being a musician and starting through live music. So that was kind of like, my way in. The way it happened for me is I was playing in bands when I was in high school, and it was tough to find good shows for high school kids to play. So I just started putting on shows. I was like 15 years old when I put on like my first concert, and my mom had to like rent the Legion halls and things that I was putting these shows on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wasn't old enough to do that. The first shows I actually 1996, and my friend's mom worked with the Girl Scouts, so they were doing like these fundraisers for the Girl Scout camp that's nearby, and she was a member of a church that had a hall, so the Girl Scouts actually sponsored like my first series of concerts where we were in this church hall, and I was booking like punk bands and metal bands and hardcore bands. And in the back of the hall, the Girl Scouts would be there with like their sashes and selling Girl Scout cookies while there's like tattoo guys and, all us little punks running around with.
And you said you were 15?
I was 15 when I was doing that. Yeah.
And what kind of music were you playing?
It was like punk rock, punk. Pop punk, hardcore.
Pop punk at a church with Girl Scouts running around.
Yep, the First Reformed Church in Piermont, New York. It's like a small community right on the water, right on the Hudson River. So yeah, it was very interesting, man. The second show I did, the singer of one of the bands had a tattoo of a spider on his neck, and it was just amazing when he went up to the counter to go buy some Girl Scout cookies. It was like the funniest thing ever. But that's how I got into doing AV. So I started putting these concerts on, and I was hiring a guy because I was only 15. I didn't really have a lot of gear. I had some recording gear, some mics and stuff for recording my band, but I didn't have a ton of gear at that point. So I was hiring a guy to bring a PA system and speakers and stuff. And after a little while, I was like, man, this is getting like expensive. I'm just gonna buy his gear. So I bought his gear from him, and then I was bringing all the gear and running the show, and then eventually, other people who were doing those hall shows. I don't know if that's a thing in Florida, but like up here, I'm on the New York, New Jersey border, and in New Jersey, like Legion Hall shows and Fire Hall shows were like the thing when I was a kid, like big garage shows and all that. So
I know in the Orlando area, you had the House of Blues. You have a couple little like club areas that they do a lot of the like underground indie up and coming bands. And then even down by us and where we grew up in Fort Lauderdale, you had the Talent Farm, you had Bosun, you had Club Red. Club Red was more of your hardcore scream rock. Talent Farm was more of your pump pop. Blink 182 style music and stuff like that. So we didn't have like the halls, but we had like kid clubs basically.
Gotcha.
That we would do shows at.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
You know what I'm loving about Ed so far is one, he's 15 years old and the entrepreneur spirit putting this all together for his band. Then he goes out and purchases all the gear so that he's doing it himself. And look at the people that he brought together: punk rock, church, and Girl Scouts. Yep. I love it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was interesting times, man. It was just great. I mean, it's the mid '90s. It was a very different time than it is today. You could get away with that kind of stuff. People didn't really like. Today, if a 15-year-old tried to rent a Legion Hall and had their mom dropping them off, it would be not really go well.
You get some sus looks.
I mean, nowadays, I don't even think you can leave a 15-year-old home alone, right? It's like, you end up getting the cops called on you. When I was a kid,
you want Department of Children and Family come for
yeah. I mean, I remember when being a kid, and being able to just not be home. My parents wouldn't have any idea where I was at like 8 years old. I would jump on my bike. I'd be gone until dinner, or later. So, yeah, it's a very, very different time. But I was very entrepreneurial even back then.
Man, that's an amazing spirit. So tell us how you transitioned from there. What happened next?
So what happened was I was putting on these shows, and then people who were putting on other shows in other halls were like, "Oh, you have a PA. Can I hire you to come do our hall show?" So I was like, "Okay, sure." So I would do these shows and I'd make a little money. Then I bought like, when I'm talking PA, I'm talking like 2 speakers on sticks, like no monitors. It was like just some speakers. So then I invested in some monitors, and then once I had monitors, it was like, "Oh, we got to hire you because nobody has monitors." So then, so then I started buying more gear. Fast forward a couple of years, and I've got like $30,000 invested in PA gear, and I'm like, "Oh, I have like a PA," and people started hiring me for bigger shows and other stuff, and it was just, it just kind of snowballed from there. And then I was still putting on concerts. I did concert promotion for about 18 years.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was always my own sound provider. So but buyer and you're doing contracts, I'd always still have my line items for production.
Okay.
So since that was me, I was making some decent money doing that.
I got you. Subcontracting yourself.
Exactly.
I like it.
It worked out well. And it was, a lot of that for me was given back to the community. So when I was in high school too, there was and what was an old church at one point had been converted to a community center, and they had a program for teens where they could do like art shows and concerts and things like that. And it was run by the students. There was like 2 adults supervising, but the kids really got to put it all together. So I was part of that group, and I thought it was like the most amazing thing because it was, it was kids empowering other kids, giving other kids a place to perform. And the whole thing was, it was drug-free, smoke-free, alcohol-free. It wasn't like, those clubs like you were talking about, Austin and Florida. They had a bottom line they had to worry about. So this wasn't like that because it was a community center. So it could totally be anybody. We weren't like, you're not good enough to play here. Like that didn't exist. So that was kind of like, I thought that was great. And being a high school kid, I'm like, this is amazing. I can play here. And why isn't there more of this? So even as I got older, I kept doing those kinds of shows. Sorry, my son is singing songs about his snack that he's getting out of the cabinet.
Gotta love it.
I don't know if you hear him in the background, but yeah. So I kept doing these shows for these kids because they just didn't have anything. But because I had this technical knowledge too, I had this great PA system. So these bands, like they were high school bands, playing on like a serious, real PA for the first time, a lot of the time. And I worked to nurture a lot of these bands. I would take. I loved booking a band that was like freshmen in high school or even like middle school kids because they would tell every one of their friends because there's like, where else are they getting on a stage and actually getting to perform? And those kids would work so hard to bring as many people to the shows as possible, and then they would leave it all out on the stage, and it was like the looks on their faces. So there was like a lot of rewarding things in the concert promotion for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome because you're helping them early in the beginning of their career, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I've worked with a lot of bands that ended up going somewhere. When I was a kid, so at that community center group, where it's in the town of Nyack, where I'm from. And which is actually, it's 2 towns away from where I grew up, but that's where it was. The band Coheed and Cambria is from our town. And those guys, Claudio and Travis, went to Nyack High School, and they're like 2 years older than me. So they got their start when they used to be called Shabuti when they were, back then.
I have album from them. I am a huge Coheed and Cambria fan.
Oh, dude, yeah, I know Claudio, I know Travis. One of the last times
Small World, huh?
I went to Disney World, they were playing at what is it at Downtown Disney? Is that House of Blues or is that
House of Blues?
Yeah, yeah. So we just happened to see that they were playing. I made 2 phone calls, and they got me and my wife up in the skybox above the stage, backstage hanging out, and then we hung out with them after the show. Yeah, no, they're great guys, and I remember the first time I heard them, I didn't feel good. I didn't want to be at the show, but I was booked to do sound that night, and I felt awful. I think I had a fever, and I remember just putting the mics up. I turned them up, and then I actually laid down. I laid down on a table, and then as soon as they started playing, when they were Shabuti, and I heard Claudio sing, I like perked up, and I'm like, "What is this?" It was my first time hearing them, and it didn't matter that I didn't feel good. I was like hooked immediately. They were just such a unique sound, so it was really cool to grow up with that in my town and nurture that.
So veering off a little bit. So veering off a little bit on the audio side here. So you're a huge Coheed and Cambria fan as well. Oh, yeah. You know what all their CDs are about, right?
Well, it's his story. Well, the first 5 of them are from his comic
Every
book,
single one of them are a comic book, and they have graphic novels as the booklet that comes inside of them. So when you get the music, and as you're listening to the music and you look through the graphic novel, it tells the story as you're playing the music. It's some of the sickest stuff ever.
Besides the liner notes, Claudio actually put out a whole graphic novel series. Like, it's the first 5 albums are follow the concept. So it's
the last 3 are a new one.
Put it all together.
Yeah.
So a couple things in the comments. Chris Brown, he said you got a sweet studio, and Peter Malone said Ed's the man.
Yeah. Peter's the man too, man. Peter's a good tech from up here in New York.
Gotcha.
This studio behind me is actually in that community center. So
is it really?
Yeah.
That's so dope.
In 2008, 2007, just before the financial collapse, like 2 years before the whole recession happened back then, there was actually like a gang violence incident in the town of Nyack, and they were looking for something to do to kind of give kids a place to not be on the street, somewhere to hang out, and learn something. So they approached me about coming up with a concept for a recording studio in the basement of the building. So they approached me and said, "Hey, can you write us up like a proposal? Like, what would it cost? What do we need? What's the gear?" So I came up with a gear list and some, pricing for this. And then they added like the construction costs, wrote a grant, and got a grant for like $250,000 to build this recording studio. and it was like, awesome, great, we're gonna have this really cool space. Then the financial collapse happened, and the state of New York was like, oh well, here's some hoops to jump through. Here's some more hoops to jump through, because they didn't have the money to actually pay on the grant. So it took like 8 years before the money was ever really dispersed.
Jeez.
And then it was like a year and a half of construction. So the studio was designed, the actual rooms were designed by Frank Commental, who built the Hit Factory in New York City.
Okay, I know Hit Factory very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Frank's like the man. So it sounds amazing. It's a very well designed room, but they didn't pay him to put the gear in and design any of that. So I picked out the gear for this studio. I picked out that console. I think it's the only one of that console in the entire country. It's
wow.
It's modeled after an old Trident. When Trident closed, their engineers started their own company. They produced this one model of console roughly around 1999, and this one actually came from England. It lived in a studio in Massachusetts for a while. Then it moved to Brooklyn right before we got it, about a year and a half before we got it.
Okay.
And then it's there. And then those speakers in the back, those are Augsburger monitors. So like all the big hip hop guys, Snoop Dogg is like the big one that they talk about. He's got Augsburgers in his studio. He has much bigger ones than what those are. But those are still $25,000 monitors.
He's got a different budget.
Yeah. But there's two subs under, a sub under each of those monitors too. So it's a thumping system. It's super flat. It sounds great in that room. So part of it was it's a learning facility for these kids, and it's also, we have an auditorium upstairs. So we tied in, the audio. I designed it so that it could be as well rounded as possible. We can record live events that happen upstairs in the auditorium where there's a stage. There's a live room behind the glass over there.
Okay.
It's small, so we can track in there. And then I ran tie lines through the building to a few places so we can put amplifiers in like a closet upstairs, but have the band all together on the stage. And, I made it really super flexible. And I went with an analog console because I wanted to do something that there's a lot of home studios in our area.
Okay.
But none of them have like a big analog desk. They're mixing in Pro Tools in the box, which is cool. I mean, hey,
it's in the box in terms of the music world lately, apparently.
Right. Well, it's easy. It's easy. You can do it for cheap to mix the box, and you can have that in your house. And it's better to be able to be creative than not be creative. So those tools are great. But if you wanted to be able to mix on an analog console and listen to these speakers, we had a listening environment that maybe some of these people don't have in their home. And they get analog EQs, and they can twist knobs and push faders and plug in outboard gear. So
it's always fun to get your hands dirty, right?
Oh yeah. But again, that the whole point of being entrepreneurial, they wanted to be able to generate some income from the studio. So instead of creating a studio that someone else has in their house, I created what they didn't have.
Yes.
So I was trying to fill the void.
Fill the void. Yep.
Nobody had a big analog, and people who were involved in this project fought. They were like, oh, let's just do RedNet and Dante, and we'll be able to drop Dante boxes anywhere in the building and just do it over IP. And I said, well, there's no real IT infrastructure. This is an old church that was built in the early 1900s. It's an old building, and there's no IT infrastructure really. So I said, hey, who's going to put all that in, and then who's going to be the IT guy? Because I'm not doing that. I don't have the time for that. I'm not an IT guy. I'm still not going to solve all their IT problems all the time. So I said, we're going to go analog, because analog's never going to go out of style. You're always going to have to plug a microphone into something and get it into, we have Pro Tools in the space. It's not like we're running reel to reel. That would be astronomically expensive. So we still have Pro Tools, and Pro Tools, we have 32 tracks of Pro Tools, and it comes back into that console. So comes out of the console into the Pro Tools. It can come back if you want to mix on the desk. If you want to mix in the box, you still have that option.
Yes.
But I made it so that it was very configurable. Plus, for teaching kids, there's something much different between, twisting a knob or pushing a fader to just shaking a mouse.
Oh yeah.
Understood.
The
And
tactile
let me put a
experience.
pause in that real quick because I do want to tell you, first of all, my commendations and all respect to you, Ed, because actually I'm a part of a group who's trying to make a change for some at-risk youth at the moment. And one of the things that we're focusing is a lot of the troubled youth, for lack of a better way to put it, they don't have an outlet. They don't have anything to steer their attention and direction into a positive area or where they should be focused on. And that's why a lot of them end up getting in trouble.
Right.
But a lot of them have this same interest in music. And maybe some of them aren't great performers, but they want to learn the behind the scenes. Some want to learn the management side of things. Some want to learn the recording art side of things, and maybe even the IT side of things. But if they can learn all of these things and they have some place where they can dive in with their talents, start to use their imagination and expand their mind a little bit more, I feel like commendations off to you, man. It's a great thing that you're doing. I love the cause of it too.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the whole point of those projects were. Between the community center with the concerts, that program was called the Backdoor Cafe.
Okay.
So it'll be easier if I can reference it that way. But the Backdoor Cafe model was actually implemented other places. They did it in Chicago. I feel like they did it in Seattle. There was a handful of places around the country that kind of copied that model because it worked so well. And funny, Chris, the guys from Coed, Claudio and Travis, were two of the original student staff members when
awesome.
The Backdoor Cafe started. So
I like hearing stories like that of, artists and stuff that actually help their communities and do things like that, because you already know of who they are, right? So you hear of all the stuff that they've done, you hear their music, you think they're great people, and then you find stuff like that out about them, and it's like, all right, now it makes you feel better about supporting that person and what they're doing, because that support is going to help something else.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And also, as you see their success, can you imagine the other youth that come behind them like, oh, at one point they were in my shoes too. They were right here in this room. So I love it.
Yep.
I love it. If you have any questions or anything at all, please feel free to post them in the comments. I'm telling you, Ed is a brilliant guy. Tap into his mind while we have the chance. I'm telling you, open up the comments are wide open. Let's get those questions coming in as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we got one here right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw it up there. And it says, I'm curious what you think of Shure's new mic, the MV7.
I just saw that yesterday, or that maybe it might even been this morning. I saw the release of that. It's basically an SM7B but with a USB. So it's got a preamp and an AD in it, A to D converter, analog to digital, and you can run it in as a USB microphone. But I believe it also has an XLR out on it, so you can still use it analog if you wanted to. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm very interested to hear it. Obviously, I'm using an SM7B right now, and I love how this sounds. It's that's why it's pretty much a standard in the broadcast kind of world.
Got me fawning over his mic over there.
What was that, Chris?
I said you got me fawning over your mic over there.
Yeah, well, hey, look now you may want to look at the new one, the MV7, because it's pretty much the the SM7B, but with the USB connection.
I'm XLR anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't have to be anymore if you didn't want to be.
I have to be with my mixer.
Oh, right. So you
I
can
have
do
to
your
use my mixer to do fun little things like this.
Welcome.
Right.
Rocco had a question he was asking. Yes, this is StreamYard, Rocco. AV Educate said faders over mouses all day or switchers. I agree 100%.
Yeah. The hostess with the most is coming in and checking in on us. You see that, right?
Yeah. I see you. We're here working, brother.
Yeah.
So I saw that you also did a little bit of theater. Tell us about that.
Well, so I mean, in high school, I worked theater. So I did stage crew, and then I was a fly operator for the plays when I was in high school. But then much
Austin,
later,
he sings. I'm still trying to get him to sing.
Nope. I don't do that anymore. But the theater, I was never on stage really. I was always behind the scenes. I worked over at a theater at SUNY Purchase. There's a performing arts center. I worked there for a couple of years. Pretty recently, I was that was kind of like my gig where I was getting benefits up until halfway through the pandemic. I was working there, and I would do a lot of the music. You know, I was doing a lot of the audio. I'm not really much of a lighting guy. That's kind of where I have a little gap in my knowledge.
Okay.
I can do like a stage wash and a podium special, you know, but if I had to work on an Ion, I could do that, but I'm not a Hog guy or a Grand MA guy. That's just not my thing. And there's only so much I can put in here, you know.
That's what you say, but you got a whole lot in there spilling out already, man.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I'm gonna cut you short because you just said
Nicholas just called you out in chat and says Ed definitely sings some mean pop punk.
Yeah, man. These people who know me are popping in here. This is dangerous. I shouldn't have promoted this at all. So, Nick is a great guy. Nick is the singer of a band called the Car Bomb Parade that I used to play bass in. So Nick,
so you did perform. You said you was always behind the scenes. So.
Well, no, I didn't do theater. No, I played in bands for many, many years. Yeah.
What do you play?
Play guitar and bass, primarily, a little bit of drums.
Man, you guys are on everything, bro.
Yeah. I have an unhealthy amount of instruments.
Okay.
So I have a ridiculous amount of. I think I'm up to something like 29 guitars, basses.
Okay, I was just about to ask, what's that collection like? Jeez.
Yeah, about 20. I think it's about 29 guitars and basses, 2 or 3. Well, definitely 2 drum sets, an electronic kit too. So I guess 3. And then I've got a huge collection of tube amplifiers.
I think Bodie wants to jump on that electronic.
Yeah.
I play drums and bass as well. And I loved playing drums. Just obviously the room for them and everything like that can be very challenging. But with the electronic drums, I've seen some of the kits, they collapse into each other. So it's the pads, right? And you spread all the pads out. You hook them into your computer. You hook them into your mixer or whatever the heck you're hooking them into. You jam out play, and you just literally take the whole assembly kit, pull the pins, and slide it together, and you can tuck it somewhere, and it's out of the way. They're bad, but they're like $800, $900 for some of the electronic ones. The really nice ones that can do that.
They go up to sky's the limit too. They get pretty expensive. I have a cheap one. It's just for playing around a little bit. But it is nice to be able to put headphones on or plug it into the PA, because then you've got, you know, throw some subs for that kick drum. You can make it sound huge, you know.
Got it. So we're about halfway through. We're hearing a little bit more about the backstory.
Yeah, that was a lot of history. Jeez.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So how do we transition over to the corporate side of things? How do you get to the corporate world in AV?
I got tired of not making a lot of money doing music. You know, there's just not as much money in live bands, especially if you're doing like bar bands or anything like that. As I got older, I kind of got out of doing the concert promoting. I got out of it, and then I got pulled back into it for a bit, because I was playing in that band with my buddy Nick, and we started putting on shows. We actually started putting on shows at an arcade. You'll appreciate that, Bodie. It was an actual arcade that opened up here, and we started packing a whole bunch of punks into. You know, we put like 106 people in for one show.
And after my own heart, right there.
Yeah. Awesome. But you know, I figured when
was it called Raid the Arcade?
Yeah. That was the first show. That's what we put on the flyer.
Nick just chimed in with it.
Yeah, Nick designed that flyer. Actually, he's a good graphic artist, graphic designer.
Nice. Omar says that he sees a band forming now.
Oh yeah, jeez. Yeah. But so yeah, I wish when I was a kid. If, like, you know, when they say those things you see on Facebook, if you could go tell your 18-year-old something, I would tell my 18-year-old self to start doing corporate now. That would be my thing, because when I was a kid, I was like, I'm too punk rock to do corporate. I'm never going to do corporate. Like, forget that. I'm going to do music my whole life. And I wish I would have a better retirement plan right now if I would have started doing corporate when I was a kid.
I understand.
But yeah, no, I got into corporate. Actually, it was through Nick. I met Nick somewhere. He was working somewhere, and we met. And his brother owns an AV company.
Okay.
So he was like, "Oh yeah, let me make a connection." He connected me to Kurt, his brother, and I started freelancing for him. After a couple of years, he had an opening for full timer, so I went full time at Proactive Technologies.
Okay.
And at that point, I was, I had gotten into video ahead of that, but I really, once I started freelancing in the corporate world, is when I really took into learning more switching. I had been doing projection already before that. I was mostly audio heavy, but once I went corporate, I really got into, switching, got much more into projection, then eventually moved into LED, got into high res data switching, Barco E2s, spiders. Right before the pandemic, I went to Georgia and did the Aquilon class in February.
Okay.
Then March 4th, I was out in Arizona doing the Spider X80 class. And then I went to Evolve in Vegas on my way home from that class and did a camera engineering class. And then my last day of work was March 12th. So,
yeah, I think we all got the e-brakes pulled on us in March.
Yeah. But that was, one of the things I've been doing, especially since getting into corporate, is I've always been trying to earn as many certifications. I never stopped learning. That's kind of what drove me to AV Educate and doing the AV Tech Talks. Was I think education in our field is super important.
Agreed.
There's a lot of people who they either get stuck because they don't know, the gear, so they can't be an operator, or there's other people who, do the fake it till you make it, and they say, oh yeah, I could do anything. And then you get on a show and now they got to get bailed out by somebody, and that's not good either. So I don't actually subscribe to the fake it till you make it thing, but one thing I do is I don't turn jobs down, even if I'm not 100% qualified for the job. What I do is I'll take the job and then I learn how to do the job.
Understood.
So I'll read the manual. I'll watch every YouTube video I can find. I'll watch a webinar replay, whatever it is, and I will dive into that thing. And I've always kind of been able to pick up a manual for a piece of gear, read it cover to cover twice, and have it. I remember it's probably about 2006 or so, 2005 maybe. The first time I mixed on a digital console, it was a Mackie TT24. Nobody's ever heard of it. Nobody's ever seen them. They were very short-lived, but in that time, the only digital consoles were super expensive. This is right around the time that the PM5D was coming out. Maybe the M7 was out at that point, or the LS9, and the LS9 would have been the most affordable at that point, which started at 11 grand. But the Mackie TT24, it was a Mackie, so it was $2,000. It was like the equivalent of today's X32, way ahead of its time. It was that low budget kind of digital mixer. So I get a call to do a show out in Long Island, and they're like, hey, can you mix on a TT24? I'm like, oh, of course I can. All right. I downloaded the manual. I read it 3 times. I felt pretty good about it. So I go to the show, and there's a house.
I think that wasn't a Zoom call, Ed, because if they saw your face, sure I can.
Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness it was not a Zoom. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I get to the show. There's a house guy, and he's kind of going to babysit me as the the hired gun, and I'm setting up the board. He's showing me some stuff, and we get to stereo channels. I remember this very distinctly. He's like, yeah, let me know if you need to unlink those stereo channels. And I was like, oh yeah, you just hold down the select button on both of them and it'll unlink them. And he's like, stop. How did you just do that? And I'm like, I just held down the 2 select buttons and it unlinked, or you can relink them. He's like, you've got to be kidding me. He's like, we have a control. So it like an X32, you can hook up an editor. So they had a desktop computer down by the stage. And he said anytime they wanted to link or unlink channels, they took the console, because it was like the NX32 size, brought it downstairs off the balcony, plugged it into the editor, and did it that way because they didn't know. They never read the manual. So
Wow. Oh.
right. So I
Wow.
looked like a hero to this guy because and then he's like asking me stuff about the console, and I'm like, oh man, I'm remembering stuff from the manual.
Like, damn, I just stuck my foot in my mouth.
Right.
I want you to bring one of those comments up. This Omar says, reading the manual has been one of the fastest way to move his career forward. And
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. 100%.
Absolutely.
And some, just to touch base on one of the things that you said, I also don't believe in faking it until you make it, but rather face it till you make it. So you did the exact right thing. You got yourself the opportunity, dove deep into it by educating yourself, getting yourself the education and knowledge what you need to prepare yourself before you put yourself in a situation. Then when it was time to execute, you became the expert on the scene.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's about doing your homework. You know, that's absolutely what it is. You know, if you dive into it and take it seriously, that's the other thing. You know, when I want to learn something, I treat that like a job. You know, I show up to every AV job on time, you know, which means I'm early because early is on time is late. And when I want to learn something, I just dedicate. I say, today, this is 4-hour block. I am just spending time learning this thing. And then I go in and I learn it. And I turn off the distractions and focus until I feel comfortable. Or until my brain is fried, depends on which happens first. But
so Omar is asking, what does RTFM mean? I have a feeling I know what it means.
Oh,
you say.
I know what it means. Yep. Read the effing manual.
Read the manual.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's what it is. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's, you know, you can find everything in the manual pretty much. I mean, pretty much, yes.
Yeah, Nicholas, you just said he did a similar read the manual and fake it with graphic design, but you can't teach motivation. And that's Absolutely. The one he hit the nail on the head right there, because the education can be there, the book can be there, but even the people you are working with, they said they never read the manual. But right. You can't give somebody the motivation, what it takes for them to want to dive deep and learn a little bit more, make themselves more skills, and actually make their jobs a lot easier at the end of the day.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's, I mean, they give it to you for a reason, right? They give you all the instructions. The manufacturers want you to be successful. You know, it doesn't benefit them if people take out their gear and then they trash their shows because they didn't understand how to use it. So there is something to be said for gear that's so intuitive that you can just walk up to it and operate. And that's a dream.
Yes.
And I started mixing on analog consoles. That's where I got my start. When I was in college, the first time, like right out of high school, I took a radio production class and we learned how to cut tape. You know, that was I graduated high school in 1999. So this is like the beginning 2000s, and we learned how to cut tape. And it's like, those are skills that, you know, aren't really taught today, but are transferable to once you understand how that works and why you splice at a 45-degree angle and all that stuff. It's like things make sense. And you know, in having that analog background, I could walk up to pretty much any console that was analog and be fine, because, you know, it's not a lot of, there's a lot of overlap. There's not a lot of groundbreaking things in analog consoles. I remember the first time I used a VCA console and I was like, this is amazing. This is the greatest thing ever. And I used to love mixing on old, where I used to mix at this place, the Sherman Theater out in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. I had a client that would bring me out there all the time. And there was a Yamaha PM 3500. I think that might have been the first VCA console that I mixed on. And I just remember, I'm like, wait a minute, I can assign all my drums to VCA 1 and just with one fader. I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, there's
for myself.
Yeah. It was great. So yeah, there's so there's something to be said for gear and knowing things and being able to walk up to something and not have to read the manual. But if you do a little bit of homework, I own a couple Allen and Heath consoles, and there's really cool routing stuff that you can do with them that not every console does. So it's like, if you understand, if you've read the manual and you've looked at like the block diagram or the schematics and you understand the signal flow, that's, which I guess how I'll segue back. I mean, I know that the podcast is kind of like a follow-up to the AV Tech Talks, and my talk was back before Labor Day. So my talk was way back.
Yeah.
And my talk got derailed by a 40-minute conversation about microphones when my plan was to talk about signal
That
flow.
was your fault.
I know. Well, no, it was. Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have invited so many other audio guys. I should have known that was going to cause a conversation for 40 minutes on microphone.
Here's a good question that Omar asked. What's your thoughts on reading the manual versus watching stuff on YouTube?
So, okay. YouTube is great because you can find things very quickly, and you can get a visual. Somebody can show you something. What's not great about YouTube is you still have to do a bit of BS detecting to see what people know. You never know what the person who's actually presenting the material knows or not. So there's a little bit of that. I'm someone who can read a block diagram and read a schematic. So sometimes the first place I'll go is to those back pages that nobody ever gets to in a manual. And that's where I'll look and I'll say, oh, okay, I understand exactly where the flow is going. So that'll 9 times out of 10 answer the question that I'm trying to figure out.
That's actually something that we should touch base on really quickly, because we tend to get overcomplicated in all the new nuances and details and things of the sort. But if we dial it back down to the basics, understanding the basics of signal flow, signal chain, and how things operate and why they operate the way that they operate, whether you're working on analog, which everything is at your hands and at your fingertips and make it so easy. But if you go over to a digital console, you may not know where things are, but you know what you're looking for. And all it is a matter of finding exactly where that location of what you're looking for to make whatever adjustment is need be.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the transition to digital for me was very easy because I already had that analog background. And like I said, I put that analog console in that studio because I wanted the kids to learn, start at the top. You've got a preamp, then you've got your EQ. Well, you got a high pass filter, then you've got your EQ, you've got your insert, which on that board you could move. Then you've got aux sends, and it follows the path down the channel strip. So
yes, sir.
It gives you a good visualization. When you jump into digital, if that's where you started from, it's very easy to not understand where the roots of it came from.
Yep.
Yes.
I think sometimes working on an analog desk, if I could it forces you to make choices early in the process. A lot of things in digital, it's like because you can route something to any point depending on what console you're on.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times we don't think about, you kind of figure it out on the fly, and you often can get yourself painted into a corner where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then the curveball gets thrown at you later. Oh, we have to add this, and you're like, where on an analog console you start asking a little more questions because you've got limited resources. So the gear actually maybe dictates how you're going to route things because it can only do what it can do.
Exactly.
So it sometimes makes some choices for you, but that kind of putting the work into the pre-pro, that was like the pre-production. That was the great thing about analog is you just have to really, think about it and focus on it. You didn't have, I can just call up another matrice or I can turn this aux into a subgroup. It was like, I have this many subgroups, this many auxes, maybe matrices, maybe not.
Let's make it work.
You had to make it work in there. You couldn't pull up you only had as many graphic EQs as were in the rack that came from the shop without having someone to make another run for a graphic EQ, where on my desk, I can call up on my Yamaha's QL1 that's sitting right next to me. I've got, 8 graphic EQs built in and I can call up another 8 if I need them. So I can call up, I guess, what is it? It's 32. I don't know if it'll let me do 32 instances of parametric EQ. That would be interesting. I'm going to try that when we're done. Can I have 32 parametric EQs? Because there are 2 channels. So yeah, I mean, there's, we get into these and Pro Tools. So I also learned recording on ADATs. So, and if anyone who might not know what an ADAT machine is, it used a super VHS tape. So basically, if you don't know what a VHS tape is, VHS is how we watched videos before there were DVDs.
You don't know what Blockbuster is?
For some of the younger generation, I only know what a Blu-ray is.
Right. Well, that's true. I know it's crazy. digital audio recording, but it was linear digital audio recording because it was going onto a physical tape. It was magnetic tape. The ones and zeros were getting printed on there as, you know, magnetic electrical data. So you had to mix linear. You couldn't like, there wasn't like, oh, let me just take this snippet and drag it back and put it there. That's not how it worked. So I learned on ADATs, and kind of when I was in school the first time around, we had Pro Tools, but we also had ADAT. So I kind of got those at the same time, but it was like the really, you know, Pro Tools was very rudimentary at that point. Digital Performer was actually a program we were using too. I think we were using Sonar. Yeah, I mean, it was very, you know, there wasn't very many affordable options. The Digi 001 came out right when I was kind of in school, and was like the first real affordable interface and Pro Tools that the consumer could buy. But having that learning on ADAT makes you think. You can't just say, oh, we'll fix it later. Oh, we'll just move this. We'll just copy and paste the chorus, you know, the first chorus to the second chorus. You know, you have to do that twice. If there's two choruses in the song, you're doing them twice.
The recording process was a lot longer. The amount of studio time required was a lot more.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was a different thing, but you had to think of those things ahead of time and account for them and plan for them. So, and a lot of that gets lost just because there's so many choices we have today with digital that, you know, you can go in any direction once you've started pretty much. And there's so many ways to get to where you want to be, the end result. It's so easy to get, what do they call that? Choice paralysis or something where like you just get
paralysis. Analysis paralysis,
something like that. Yeah, where you can, you know, you have so many choices that you can't decide. You don't make one.
Yeah, they're sitting there analyzing them so much in between the two, and they're not making a decision. And how do we move forward?
Yep. Exactly.
Omar said he used to love Blockbuster. He said we can get a game and play all weekend. I have my Blockbuster memories too, but back then we actually had to get a rewinder because the VCR used to take forever to rewind it, and if you didn't rewind it before you returned it to Blockbuster, they'd charge you a fee.
Yep. Yep.
Do you believe you understand signal flow from an analog perspective, physical, and help you with digital signal flow, or which isn't always visual?
Absolutely.
I would definitely say so.
Absolutely. No, yeah, 100%. I've watched a lot of people get completely lost on a digital console in their layers and their routing because it's all these cross points that don't exist. You don't see them. They're just virtual. So there's not a physical cable A plugging into point B to make those connections. So I've seen a lot of people get really lost. They forget what layer they routed something on, or they did a soft patch of an input and moved it to a different channel, and they forgot about it, and they can't find it, where to go. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And having that analog signal flow background, I think very much helped me in my transition to digital. And that's why I wanted to teach it to kids. I figured that if you can understand it, even if you end up going digital, you're just going to understand that more complex and sophisticated routing that much better once you move in, and you're going to appreciate it because once you've been on an analog console and you're like, oh, it's so frustrating, I wish I could do this, and then you get exposed to digital, you're like, oh, that moment. There you go. There's your singing, Bodie. You get that moment of, this is awesome. I can do the things I wanted to do. And, you know, I work on M and X32s every once in a while, more than once in a while. And there's things on those like super great for the money. It's a low cost console. It does a whole ton of stuff. Super great. It's nothing like what my Yamaha console can do. And obviously I'm more comfortable where I have more bells and whistles and more toys, but I understand what the limitations of the X32 are. And then I change my workflow to fit that. And I have my tips and tricks for like, okay, how do I accomplish what I want to accomplish within these parameters? And sometimes that's actually fun, you know, like, oh, okay. It's like, you know, it's like running a 3-legged race, you know? Okay. It's awkward and I'm kind of hindered, but it's going to be fun anyway. So
Yes, sir. You're gonna make it work at the end of the day, and that's what we need to make happen, right?
exactly.
Sir. Well, we got about 8 minutes left. I want you guys to drop any further questions that you have down in here, and
Yeah.
I kind of just wanted to touch base on some basic things that we see our industry starting to come back. Little shows are starting to trickle in little by little. For any of the technicians or any of the outstanding guys who's watching this right now, what is your advice to guys who's in this position who may still be on the sidelines or who's starting to see things come back? What's your opinion? What would be worse that you would tell these guys?
So follow up with all the companies you worked for. If you're a freelancer, just reach out to the hiring, the labor coordinator. Reach out to the owner of the company if you have that kind of relationship. Drop them an email. Just say, hey, what's going on? How are things? Not even a sales pitchy kind of thing. Don't like hit them up for work right away. Just say, how are you doing? How is there any way I can be helpful to you? Is there anything? Could I come to the shop and play with something? Like I want to learn something else. How could I be valuable to you once events start coming back? Really reach out to people and work on fostering those relationships that you have already, because it's going to be hard to forge new relationships when things come back. I've always been pretty good at getting my foot in the door places. A lot of that I think comes from the amount of education that I do on my own time.
Okay.
I am all of that's on my resume and on my LinkedIn, and I make sure people know that I've taken all of these classes because it shows that I've invested in myself.
Yes, sir.
It shows that at least on the day that I took the test for the class, that I had an understanding of how to do it from the manufacturer. So where I always hear from people, oh, education isn't important in this industry. It's more who you know and that you do a good job. Sure. Okay. That is most of the industry. But when you're making new relationships, sometimes having that education to back up your experience, because I could tell you guys, oh yeah, I've done this gig, I can operate this machine, I can do this, I can do that. All of that could be made up. If you don't know me from a hole in the wall, then there's no telling. But
and
if
how
I can,
easy is that to happen in this industry, right?
oh, that happens all the time, and that's the fake it till you make it. Of course I can put up a video wall. I was just working with someone recently who said, that the first time they put up a video wall, they had no clue what they were doing. They took the job, they figured they'd figure it out, and with a few phone calls they did the phone a friend, they were able to get through the job. But then they took a class, and then they said they realized everything they did on that first job, that wall could have killed somebody the way they rigged it.
Oh, wow.
They said, they were like, I had no idea what I was doing. And then once I learned what I was doing, I realized how badly I did it trying to figure it out. So
that's why education is important.
Exactly. But walking into making new relationships, I've found, for me personally at least, being able to back it up with, I have these certs. And I mean, I have a laundry list of certs. If you look at my LinkedIn, it's just, between Barco and Christie, like I said, Abson, Rowe, Brompton, Disguise, Watch Out, all of these things, Yamaha, Allen Heath, Digico. It's, you hand them that and you say, well, yeah, I have all these certs, so I do know the gear that you own. And I strategically picked Abson and Rowe because the two main rental houses in the New York market, one has Abson, the other one has Rowe.
There you go.
So I learned, and by doing that, because Abson uses Novastar, Rowe uses Brompton primarily, I learned the two major processors as well. So, do strategic things. Like, sometimes it's great. You want to learn, some obscure piece of gear, and that's good if if it's something that's going to enrich your knowledge. But also look at strategic things, like what's going to get you some work, because you're making an investment. My Barco class was $1,500 for the E2 class.
Got it.
But I made that back in one E2 job that was a couple days long. So
true.
Exactly.
That's what guys don't understand. So when this downtime, a couple of things that Ed said that I really feel like we should double down and touch base on again is one, focus on your current relationships that you have with your clients. Focus on building new relationships. How can you get your foot in the door? And three, use this downtime to be educating yourself. Absolutely. Educate yourself on further gear and newer departments. And obviously things are transitioning to a virtual side. We don't know if they'll be like this forever, but what I feel is that virtual would be an addition to the live events that we have going forward. Absolutely. So it's best that we deep dive and start learning all of the stuff that we can for all of these virtual events. Why? So that we can be a useful asset to our clients.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to figure out how to make money? Figure out how you can help people. And if this is what they'll need help with, then why not at least try to obtain those skills so that you can be a useful weapon for them.
Yep. I'll tell you, when the pandemic hit, so the whole month of March and April, I was doing roughly 30 hours a week of webinars.
Wow.
On different things. A lot of it was stuff I knew already, but I did learn a lot during those things. It was like things. So ClearCom, there was a ton of ClearCom webinars that came out. Practical Show Tech. These guys, Pete Erskine, did great webinars on everything comms and RF. And I was watching that. They were broadcasting every day, and I was watching it every day. Every day I was watching at least one of their webinars. At one point, they were doing 2 a days. And okay. I was in there every time. I already knew Free Speak, but they dove into Free Speak in a way. One of their webinars, they went through every single checkbox, every single setting, where I knew Free Speak from using it on jobs. I wasn't formally taught Free Speak. So there was stuff that I was like, oh, that's what that does. I've seen it, but I've never had to touch that button.
It was still more you learned.
Yeah. Barco was doing a ton of training, and I would jump on those. Evolve was doing a ton of the Barco classes too, and I would jump on each one of those. Even though I was already certified on the E2, I picked up things from every one of those classes, and I picked up a lot of things from the comments. So there's something to be said, like when you do these, it's great to watch them live because you get the interaction, you get to ask questions, and so depending on the volume, you get them answered live. So it's a great format. So I recommend anybody who's, not sure what to do right now, like it's not too late. Like the next best time to do something is right now. So start learning stuff. I mean, we do AV Tech Talks every week. We do a couple hours and we learn a new thing. I was on a job the last 3 days, and the people I was working with, I had never worked with before. It was a new company I got on a referral from someone else I work with at a webcasting company. So okay. It was like, I made a new connection by making a new connection during the pandemic. So it was great. But I'm talking to some of the techs, and we start talking about vMix and NDI. And one of the other guys brings up Malumen. And then someone brings up, we start talking about Stream Deck and Companion. And then I brought up Central Control. And I said to them, every one of these things we just talked about, I've done an episode on AV Tech Talks about.
Yes, sir.
I sent them a link to it. And they were, and when the one guy brought up Malumen, I mean, he is French, so it's understandable because a lot of people don't know what Malumen is, and it's a French company. I was like, oh yeah, we did an episode on that, and I sent him a link in the Slack chat, that we were all in, and he was like, oh, this is great. So and at AV Tech Talks, we kind of tailored the episodes on things we think were valuable for people right now. So we're kind of curating it in a way to do that so that you could pop in and anything you look at is going to be something that's relevant to the virtual streaming worlds. I mean, we did NDI, we did TriCaster. We're going to be doing remote production in the cloud soon. Like these are things that are important in today's world. But we don't do the E2s and the Ascenders and the Aquilons because there's already so much of that content out there, and
classes out there for it now.
But also none of our viewers are going to be able to touch that piece of gear until live events come back. So they can play with the simulators, which is great. And for that, go to the manufacturer and learn that stuff. Absolutely. Play with the simulators, download them. They're free. Just
yes, sir.
Do that on your own time. But the things like where we do our demos, it's stuff that you can use like today. You know, the companion Pi. Like if you want to build a Raspberry Pi to run your companion, there's no like real instructions on how to do that anywhere.
Yeah.
So we did an episode on it. Things like that. So pay attention. You know, like
Sorry.
focus on the things that are going to help you now, and it's not too late to do so. But learn something. If you learn one new thing a week, just pick one thing to learn a week. Whether it's, you know, and what resolutions and bit rates make the most sense for whatever platform you're going to be using.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, spend an hour, spend 2 hours, like do some research, learn that kind of stuff, seek it out on the line. Go on YouTube's website, on Twitch's website, look for what specs they want. Now you know, oh, I can't send a 4K 60 signal to a streaming platform because they're going to crush it down anyway.
Yeah.
Facebook's going to make it 720 30. So you just, you know, take the time to figure out the things that are going to be useful right now, so you can pivot if you haven't already made that pivot.
One of the things that I feel is useful right now, and Rocco brought it up, was OBS.
Yeah.
And so he was asking if OBS offers a certification. Omar said they don't.
Right.
He said maybe they should, but apparently he wants to have a duel, and he'll challenge anyone to an OBS knowledge duel. So
Yeah.
Let's have that out there, Rocco. I'll link
You
up
don't
with
want
you
to
on
do
that
that.
one.
You don't want to do that, Chris.
Okay.
Trust me.
Well, we'll figure it out. I'm good on it.
Rocco is the host of a show on Twitch. The other Lone Star. So Rocco is a dead ringer when it comes to OBS. He is nasty with OBS. So he's asking some of those questions to be facetious, but yes, no.
I know he's asking the questions to be facetious because anybody knows that there is no such thing as an OBS certification because it's a homebrewed software.
Right. Well, he says he'll take you on. So
let's go, brother. I'll happy to do a competition with you.
Yeah, Rocco does some really cool stuff.
That's what these podcasts are. People are free. Oh, I love it. Everyone's feeling froggy tonight.
Yeah. And like, so this is a great example. Rocco is someone I work with at this webcasting company. We happen to come together, completely different worlds. We had never worked together in the live event space, but we're working together on these webcasts. And we have a separate chat in our Slack that's like just some of the tech guys nerding out, and we pull things, we're posting cool things that we found. So now he's a new resource, and now he's watching this show, and it's great.
Awesome.
Building our networks. This time right now is when you should be making as many connections as you can.
Absolutely.
And there's so many sources of great free knowledge right now. Like, people are in a giving mood. People are giving this knowledge for nothing, and it's to bring everybody up. And hopefully,
tell people about what you're doing with the AV Tech Talks, just in case we have any viewers who don't know about what you're doing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. So AV Tech Talks is AV Educate is Omar's brainchild. It's sad he's not here because he explains it so much better. But the mission of AV, one of the tenets of AV Educate is to take people from stagehand to technician and technician to operator. So to that end, AV Tech Talks, we do our show every week. It's a 2-hour show, and the format is we bring in a guest who's an expert user, power user on some piece of gear, some piece of software, and they do a show and tell kind of demo discussion on that piece of gear. And then we have a panel who talks about it. Plus we take like here, we're taking the questions from good, Rocco shared his Twitter. We're taking the questions from Facebook. Now we're using Zoom webinar, so we're taking questions from the webinar side, and we're answering questions, and basically the audience is molding what they want to learn. So the questions they ask is where we take it, and it's like in real time, basically about 40 seconds later from when we get a question, we can say, oh, look, all right, we'll show you. Oh yeah, you look in this menu, it's there. And people get this instant feedback on the problems that they have, and they're learning something. So, and it's very informal. It's not like taking a class with Barco or sitting through a webinar that's a one-way conversation. That is the one downside of a lot of these webinars, is that we end up with sorry, Omar just sent something to me and I got distracted. You know, the webinars tend to be a
one-dimensional in a sense.
Right, it's someone talking at you, and like sometimes they take some of the questions from the YouTube, but it's like, I remember the Barco and the Evolve ones. It was like there were so many. The comments were happening so fast you couldn't really keep up with them. There's no way that the person who's presenting could ever answer every question that came through. So we try to. So, you know, sometimes we don't hit the mark, but we try. And the replays end up being available. And then we try to reach out to people in the comments during the show if we don't answer a question, and we come back to them. So
absolutely,
it's a whole thing. Yeah, so we were doing Sundays in October just because of scheduling conflicts, but we're switching back to Monday nights is our normal time slot, 7 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. and Canada. We have a Zoom. If I can pull it up, I'll pull up the registration if that's all right. If you guys don't mind, if I throw it in the
throw it in the comments, man. Throw it in the comments. Because we've already capped our hour, but
we've gone over a little
coming out right now that we just want to continue pouring in. So I want to make sure that people know where we can find you, can get in touch, can start to absorb as much of this knowledge as possible from this point moving forward.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry, I had to find where I could put the comment. So that's the hold on for AV Tech Talks. So there we go. I think that went in. Omar's thing is still. Oh nope, that tagged me now.
Stagehands to technicians to engineers.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Sir.
So I'm trying to not.
And while you're doing that, Rocco, I definitely dropped you a follow, brother, on Twitter. I'd love to have a little friendly competition with you on some OBS stuff. Just the first thing that you popped up on your Twitter when it popped up was a shout out command. I hope that's not something new, because I've had that for about a year and a half on my stream through OBS.
Oh, this is gonna get good. This is gonna get good.
You know what, Omar? I'm not sure if it's still on, but I feel like we got some work to do for a brand new episode. I feel like some OBS is coming. I feel it.
There we go. Cool. So I dropped that link if someone wants to register for the webinar. I actually I'm kind of pushing the webinar a little more than the Facebook. We still have love for the Facebook, but there's so many distractions on Facebook. You know, as soon as you get a notification for your friend's cat video, you know, you're going in a different direction. So
I agree.
I like the webinar. People are really engaging with it. So, you know, feel free to register for the webinar. You'll get a reminder every week that when like an hour before we go live. It's pretty cool.
Throw in the Polaroid effect. All right. Well, let me know when you can get a glisten Polaroid and a 3D render.
Oh man, this is going to get good.
We're just real quick. So, Rocco, just so you understand what we're going with here, my start screen is a clip of all of my highlights, and as the clip moves, it fades in and out and brings it in and out and dances around the screen on a 3D render motion. So the Polaroid effect is all good, and I can do the curtain call. I can do the stinger transition. It'll be a fun little. We'll have a friendly little competition.
I'm looking forward to it, Brody. I think that you're gonna be the highlight next week. Let's see what you got, man.
Won't be next week, but we'll definitely get it set up. That's for sure.
We'll have to really promote that. We'll do it like a UFC match.
That's set up. I have that.
We'll figure it out. But
well, before
my arm's falling.
Do you have any closing remarks that you want to leave him with?
Yeah, I mean, just I know it's a tough time for everybody. You know, check in with all your colleagues. You know, all the guys you freelance with, all the guys you work with in the industry. Just check in with people. Say, hey, what's going on? Everything good? Is there, you know, if you can offer some help, and you know, I'm not talking about financial help, but if you can offer help support wise, you know, talk to somebody for an hour. just check in with people, because it's pretty tough on a lot of people. Austin, you mentioned earlier, we're starting to see some work coming in. Like it is coming in. There is some work happening. It's starting to come back. It's going to be real slow. Aren't the numbers around the country? Some places aren't doing as well as other places. So some places that had free movement and maybe felt like this lockdown was unfair and we should have been working months ago, might start feeling differently than I did. For example, being in New York, I'm so close to Manhattan, all of my work disappeared, everything. The numbers were so bad here that and Broadway, I mean, just this week they said Broadway's no go till May 2021. So you know what I mean? That's a huge blow for the New York market, no matter what if you're in corporate or live music or anything. If no one's going to be doing shows, because that's just how it's going to be. So check in on people, understand that the progress is slow, but it's happening. If you haven't pivoted to doing virtual stuff, do it. Start now. I've been in the process of building a vMix machine for a while, and I really want to build it with a 30 series video card.
Okay.
Because I want to start getting into Unreal Engine and other stuff. I know I don't need a 30 series for vMix. It's overkill, but for the way I'm looking to the future with virtual reality and
you're looking
3D,
for VR. Yep.
Exactly. So I'm prepping for that, so I don't have to buy another machine 6 months to a year from now. But in the stopgap, until I can actually get my hands on a 30 series card, I just bought a new laptop the other day, a gaming laptop with a 2070 card in it. 2060 card in it, and a 4K display. So now I'm going to use that for some OBS gigs. I'm going to use it for vMix also. But I got the 4K display for my OBS stuff, so I can put two 1080 windows on that display and do two full 1080 window captures and still have some real estate left on the screen. I can plug in an external monitor and have plenty of real estate. Where working off a laptop before that, it was, things were getting tight if I wanted to have good quality window captures. Yep. So, think about that. You don't, who was it? Brendan Berry from OPAV. So one of the things he said on a talk somewhere, one of these Zoom chats that we had done very early in the pandemic, that stuck with me was, done is better than perfect.
Yes.
So don't let the idea that you need this perfect vMix machine or this perfect thing stop you from actually getting something done. So I went, the job I just did these past 3 days, basically everything I earned from those 3 days, I put into this new machine. Now I use this new machine for that job. So my machine's paid off now.
Yes.
I paid it off. I didn't take anything home salary wise, if I look at it that way, but I paid off this machine. So now every job I do from here out is profit.
Yes, sir.
So if you can do that, you don't have to get the best thing, get something that's going to work to get you started. And then eventually, you can get the machine you want, because right now, just getting into something as quickly and as soon as you can is a better proposition than waiting until you have the right machine to do it. You know what? So if you can't do vMix with 8 callers, okay. If you can do 4 callers because you have a machine that can handle that, great. Or you can't afford the vMix Pro license, so you get the next one down. That's $300. Okay. You can always upgrade later, but don't let the pursuit of having just the right thing, and I have to have the Pro license right away, don't let that get in your way of getting started in something. And it doesn't have to be vMix. I'm just using vMix as an example, because that's why I bought this laptop until I get my vMix machine built. But it could be anything, whatever it is you're looking for. Just get going. Just start today. Start tomorrow. I mean, not right now because you're watching the show, but start tomorrow. And if education is the thing that's going to get you to the next point, if you're like, oh man, I would do this, but I just don't know how to. Okay, what are you going to do tomorrow? Instead of putting the TV on, go on YouTube, go on Facebook, look at the past AV Tech Talks episode if you want a very gentle push into some of these topics, because that's kind of we cater to having it not be overbearing and super technical.
And if you're and he is right, if you're really looking into last week's episode that we just did would probably be the best guide in, not just because I was the host on it, because it was a very relaxed talk. It wasn't anything serious. It wasn't anything slam in your face information. It was just a general talk about computer anatomy and what crosses in order to hook everything up.
Yep.
It's digestible, and that's the most important part, because we have to. The best way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Exactly. And you're never going to know everything. Like, you don't have to know everything, and especially you can learn a lot, and you can be earning while you're learning in some instances, and just do it now. Like, that's the whole thing. If anything you take away from this, I hope it's motivation to take the first step forward.
Take action and do it now. I love that.
Exactly.
Do it now. Man, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on with us tonight, Ed. And with those closing remarks, I don't think I could have said it any better myself. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now, because 20 years from now, you don't want to say, I wish I did it then. So deep dive, invest in yourself in terms of your education. You make a little bit of money, reinvest back into your business. Like he said, he's paid off his gear. From this point forward, it's all profit. He's been an entrepreneur since he was 15 years old. So I think he has some wisdom in his advice that he's offering us. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I picked up so much value out of this conversation with you, Ed. And I feel like all of our listeners and all of our guests has done the exact same. I appreciate all of our guests for tuning in with those questions. If you have any further questions for Ed, feel free to reach out to him on his Facebook or on his LinkedIn. He's doing these AV Educate podcasts every Monday now, because it changed from Sundays. So they're back on Mondays. You can get in on these and start investing yourself with the education. It's absolutely necessary, guys. We have to move forward. And as we move forward, we want to get better and we want to get more skills. So with that being said, take care, gentlemen. It has been a pleasurable evening, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of it.
Yep. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.